We've all been there, splurging on a budget gaming laptop that looks good on paper, only to find it stutters the moment you hit a boss fight. Cheap alternatives often disappoint after purchase, leaving you stuck with low frame rates and thermal throttling. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When I first started looking at the ASUS ROG Strix G16, my biggest fear was buying a machine that would sound like a jet engine in a coffee shop or melt its own motherboard after a few hours of streaming. That fear is real for anyone who's tried to run modern titles on a thin and light chassis and ended up with a laptop that can't stay cool enough for an extended raid. The Strix G16 tries to solve that by pairing a 14th gen Intel i7-14650HX with an RTX 5060 GPU and a massive 64GB of DDR5 5600 memory. On paper, that looks like a recipe for smooth 1080p gaming, but the proof is in how it behaves when you actually fire up a game like Elden Ring or sit down for a 4-hour Zoom marathon with a side of Photoshop work. First off, the display. The 16-inch FHD Plus panel uses a 16:10 aspect ratio and a 165Hz refresh rate, which is a noticeable upgrade over the more common 60Hz laptops you see in the budget space. In practice, that extra vertical real estate means you get a few more lines of code when you're debugging or an extra slice of map in a shooter, and the high refresh rate translates into buttery smooth motion when you're tracking enemies. I tested it with Valorant on high settings. The frame count hovered around 140 frames per second, and the IPS panel kept colors accurate even when I turned the screen sideways for a quick spreadsheet. The downside is the brightness peaks at around 300 nits, which is fine for a dim room but can feel washed out if you're gaming near a sunny window. So if you need a laptop that can double as a daytime workstation, you might want an external monitor. Thermal engineering is where the Strix G16 really tries to stand out. ASUS equipped it with a dual-fan setup, a vapor chamber, and a series of heat pipes that push heat out of the CPU and GPU zones. During my testing, I ran Cyberpunk 2077 on ultra settings for about an hour. The GPU clock stayed close to its boost frequency, and the CPU never dipped below 2.8 GHz, which means the cooling system kept throttling at bay. The fans ramped up to a noticeable whine, but they never became an outright distraction. In a coffee shop, you'll still hear them, but they're not screaming louder than the conversation around you. The trade-off is that the chassis gets a bit bulkier than the slimmest Ultrabooks, and the bottom panel stays warm enough that you'll want a lap desk if you plan to work from your knees for long stretches. Memory and storage are another strong suit. 4 terabytes of SSD space is practically unheard of at this price point, and the 64GB of DDR5 5600 means you can have dozens of tabs, a couple of virtual machines, and a game running simultaneously without any noticeable lag. I loaded Microsoft Flight Simulator alongside Adobe Premiere and a Discord call, and the system handled the load without stutter. The only practical snag is that the SSD is soldered, so if you ever need to replace it, you'll have to rely on external drives or professional service. For most gamers that's fine, but power users who like to swap drives for a fresh OS install might find it limiting. Connectivity feels future-proof thanks to Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 5.4. In a real-world test, I connected the laptop to a 2.5 gigabits per second router and got consistent speeds around 1.8 gigabits per second, which is more than enough for cloud gaming or large file transfers. The inclusion of a full-size HDMI 2.1 port also means you can hook the laptop up to a 4K monitor at 120 Hz without needing a dock, something that cheaper laptops often miss. The only downside is the lack of a Thunderbolt 4 port, so if you rely on external GPU enclosures or fast data docks, you'll need to work around the available USB-C ports. Now, who should actually consider buying this machine? If you're a serious PC gamer who wants a portable rig that can run current AAA titles at high settings, do some light content creation, and still have the power to stream without a separate capture card, the Strix G16 hits most of those marks. It also makes sense for developers or designers who need the extra RAM and fast storage to compile code or render assets on the go. The built-in Windows 11 Pro Edition adds useful management tools for business users, so if you're mixing work and play, the OS is a plus. On the flip side, if you're looking for a thin, featherlight laptop for travel and you mainly play indie titles or older games, you'll probably be paying for performance you'll never fully use. Likewise, if you're a competitive esports player who demands the lowest possible input lag and prefers a 1080p 240Hz panel, the 165Hz screen, while solid, isn't the top tier. And